Something strange is happening to modern love. It isn't loud, it isn't dramatic, it's quiet, almost invisible. But it's reshaping the way we connect, the way we choose, and the way we slowly drift away from each other. Most people cannot name it, but almost everyone feels it. There is a subtle shift beneath our everyday interactions, an emotional undercurrent that changes how we experience desire, closeness, and loss. Something that makes real relationships harder to build and easier to abandon. Something that makes people cling to warmth while avoiding commitment, reaching for connection while resisting definition. Something that has turned the space between together and apart into a new emotional category. A situationship. Welcome to Psyche Blueprint, the place where we decode the hidden patterns shaping modern love, modern behavior, and the emotional lives we often struggle to understand. Here we take the quiet things people feel but cannot explain and bring them into the light. If you've ever wondered why connection feels harder, why clarity feels rarer, or why love feels different than it used to, you are in the right place. Today we explore a question that defines an entire generation. Why are situationships replacing real relationships? To understand this shift, we must begin with how situationships form. They rarely begin with a decision, they begin with a drift. Two people meet, attracted but uncertain. Something feels good, familiar, exciting, comforting, convenient, and they lean into it without defining it. They talk often, they share jokes and late night thoughts, they feel chemistry, but they never clarify intention. The connection becomes a soft space, warm enough to enjoy, vague enough to avoid responsibility. The deeper the emotions grow, the more dangerous the ambiguity becomes. Because a bond without definition creates attachment without safety. But why do so many people choose this? Why does a generation raised with more freedom, more independence, more emotional vocabulary than ever before choose uncertainty over clarity? One of the strongest reasons is the illusion of infinite choice. Dating apps have turned people into options. Profiles swipe by endlessly creating the belief that someone better is always just a few taps away. When everything feels replaceable, committing to one person feels like a risk. The mind whispers, don't choose too soon. Don't settle too early. Don't close the door when more doors exist. But infinite choice doesn't create freedom. It creates paralysis. Psychologists call this the paradox of choice. The more options you have, the harder it becomes to choose. The fear of choosing wrong becomes stronger than the desire to choose at all. So people avoid commitment not because they don't want love, but because choosing feels terrifying in a world where alternatives appear endless. And so they enter connections that feel good, but not grounded, close, but not committed. Situationships become the emotional compromise of a generation overwhelmed by possibility. Yet fear of choosing wrong is only one layer. Beneath it lies a deeper emotional truth. People are afraid of vulnerability. Our generation grew up in instability. Many were shaped by divorce, emotional inconsistency, financial anxiety, fractured families, or sudden loss. They learned early that the world can shift without warning. They learned that people leave. They learned that love is not always safe. And those lessons stay in the body long after childhood ends. So as adults, they guard themselves. They do not step fully into love because stepping in means risking collapse. Avoidance becomes self-protection. Distance becomes survival. Situationships provide the perfect emotional shield, closeness without exposure, intimacy without surrender, presence without the pain of real loss. But situationships also reflect a decline in emotional skills. Real relationships require communication, not the surface level kind, but deep emotional articulation. They require conflict resolution, empathy, patience, willingness to repair, ability to hold discomfort. They require honesty that feels risky and vulnerability that feels raw. But many people never learned these skills. They grew up watching adults yell, withdraw, avoid, or stay silent. They learned that discomfort is dangerous and emotional expression is unsafe. They were never taught how to communicate needs without fear or how to love someone through conflict instead of walking away. So when tension appears in a connection, they don't know how to handle it. And instead of working through it, they retreat into ambiguity where no real emotional labor is required. Situationships thrive because they demand almost nothing. You don't need to repair conflict because conflict ends the connection. You don't need to communicate needs because needs stay hidden. You don't need to grow emotionally because the structure never requires it. In a world where people feel emotionally tired, situationships become the easiest connection to maintain. But ease is not the same as nourishment, and what begins as convenience often ends as heartbreak. Loneliness also fuels situationships, but not the loneliness of being physically alone. The deeper, quieter loneliness, the longing to matter to someone, to be seen, to be wanted, to be understood. This loneliness is powerful enough to make people accept connections they know are unstable. They tolerate inconsistency because inconsistency is better than silence. They accept mixed signals because mixed signals are better than nothing. They settle for almost because almost feels safer than empty. But the loneliness inside a situationship is far more painful than being alone. It is the loneliness of being emotionally connected to someone who is not connected to you. The loneliness of waiting for a level of devotion that will never come. The loneliness of holding hope in one hand and disappointment in the other. Social culture reinforces this cycle. We live in an age that glorifies detachment. Everyone is told to be unbothered, emotionless, effortlessly independent. Caring is viewed as weakness. Vulnerability is mocked. Emotional desire is seen as a flaw. People fear being labeled clingy for simply wanting connection. They fear being labeled dramatic for asking for clarity. So they silence themselves. They pretend they don't care. They pretend they want casual when they want commitment. They hide their deeper needs because culture tells them that the bravest thing you can be is indifferent. But indifference is not strength. It is self-abandonment disguised as self-protection. Technology deepens the problem. Digital communication creates the illusion of intimacy. People exchange messages all day, share memes like stories, send emojis, and mistake this repetitive digital engagement for emotional connection. But true intimacy cannot be built through screens alone. Texting cannot replace trust. Memes cannot replace emotional support. Voice notes cannot replace vulnerability. Situationships flourish in digital spaces because they allow constant communication without requiring meaningful presence. Generational exhaustion amplifies all of this. Modern life drains people. Financial pressure wears them down. Career stress consumes their time. Anxiety clouds their minds. Emotional burnout weakens their ability to invest. Real relationships require emotional energy. Energy many people simply don't have. A situationship feels lighter, simpler, less demanding. It fits into a life stretched thin. It does not require planning, intentionality, or long-term thinking, but emotional shortcuts always have consequences. What feels easy at the beginning becomes painful at the end. Fear of rejection also keeps situationships alive. People would rather stay silent in ambiguity than risk losing someone by asking for clarity. They would rather pretend the connection is enough than ask, "What are we?" and hear the answer they fear most. Not what you want. They cling to hope instead of truth, believing that waiting longer will magically make the other person commit. But time does not change someone who benefits from the lack of definition. Silence becomes self-betrayal, and self-betrayal always becomes heartbreak. Situationships reflect another cultural shift. People want the emotional benefits of a relationship without the responsibility of one. They want affection without accountability. They want companionship without commitment. They want desire without devotion. They want emotional warmth but not emotional labor. And because both people fear asking for more, the connection floats in uncertainty, giving just enough to stay alive but never enough to grow. But beneath all the avoidance, confusion, excuses, illusions, and fears, there remains one undeniable truth. People still want love, deep love, meaningful love, safe love, love with a future, love they can trust, love that chooses them back. The desire never disappeared. It was simply buried under layers of fear, cultural pressure, emotional exhaustion, and distorted expectations. Situationships exist not because people do not want relationships, but because they no longer know how to build or sustain them. Situationships are mirrors. They show us the parts of ourselves we avoid. They reveal the fears we haven't healed. They highlight the emotional skills we lack. They expose our patterns of self-abandonment. They reflect the gap between our desire for intimacy and our fear of vulnerability. They show how often we choose attention over affection, closeness over commitment, convenience over clarity. But they also reveal our longings. They show us what we miss, what we crave, what we need. They show us that beneath our protective layers, we still want someone who chooses us without hesitation. Someone who speaks truth, not ambiguity. Someone who stays, not someone who drifts. Someone who meets us at the depth we are capable of loving. To break the cycle of situationships, we must begin with honesty. What do you want? Not what you pretend to want. Not what feels safe to want. Not what culture tells you to want, but what your heart truly desires. If you want love, stop accepting almost love. If you want clarity, stop tolerating confusion. If you want a future, stop investing in people who offer you none. If you want depth, stop entertaining the shallow. Love requires courage. The courage to be clear, the courage to be vulnerable, the courage to walk away when someone cannot meet you where you are. The courage to choose yourself even when it hurts. Because when you choose yourself, the world begins to choose you differently. You stop attracting people who thrive in ambiguity. You stop tolerating half effort. You stop accepting emotional crumbs. You stop shrinking to fit into someone else's uncertainty. Situationships are rising because people are afraid, but relationships will rise again when people become brave. Thank you for spending this time with Psyche Blueprint. If these words brought clarity, healing, or recognition, consider subscribing for more insights to help you understand your heart, your patterns, and the emotional architecture of modern love. Wishing you courage, discernment, and a love that chooses you fully.